Hi, here to continue the Are You Afraid of the Dark review series. So let's get on to episode 3 from season 3. This is the tale of room 214, and it's a Kiki story. And we start the episode with Tucker being a little shit, which happens in quite a few episodes this season, and messing around with the dust. Eventually, we find out that he was hiding it. Very clever. And Kiki gets it back and she starts the story. Okay, now the plot of this one is Stacy, who's the protagonist, has just moved into a new apartment with her mother. There's another girl in the apartment complex about her same age, but she's an asshole, so they don't get along. Stacy wants to meet a friend her own age, but is still happy to start a relationship with her elderly neighbor, whose name is Madeline, and she lives all by herself, and she's a lonely old woman. Stacy helps her out, helping her with her groceries and things like that, and they enjoy spending time together. She likes hearing her stories about back in the day, and they actually form quite a friendship. But on a very specific night, Madeline requests that Stacy stay with her. And Stacy agrees, but then the girl, the one who lives in the same complex as her, who was being rude to her before, asks her to go to a concert on that same night. And since Stacy really wants to make a friend her own age, she stands up Madeline. And once she comes back, she finds that Madeline's apartment is empty, and Madeline is acting very creepy, disappearing, teleporting everywhere. And she figures out that Madeline is actually a ghost. And the night that she stood her up was the anniversary of her death. So that ought to ring a few bells. You've probably seen this episode. I remember it pretty strongly from when I was a kid. And I think it's a really great story. One thing I really like about it is the horror in the story comes from the guilt that Stacy feels for standing up Madeline on the night of her death. And I think that's much scarier than, a scary clown or some of the other villains that these episodes have. Another thing I really like about it is at the end of the episode, to get Madeline to stop haunting her, Stacy just apologizes and tells her the truth that she met a new friend, and that's why she didn't hang out with her. And Madeline totally understands, and she asks her, are you guys friends now? Did everything work out at the concert? And that's the way she diffuses the situation and sort of overcomes the bad guy, although there's not really a bad guy in this episode. And I really like that because if you think back to it's a big trope on TV, but if you think back to like the tale of the hatching from last season, that's the one with the dinosaurs in that like camp where they feed them the gruel and the private school. Sorry if it sounds crazy, but anyways, they find out that the way to kill these lizard people is with rock music. And, you know, I hate it when there's always some easy fix like that. In this one, though, it totally makes sense. To get over her guilt, Stacy has to apologize. And it's really good storytelling, especially for a show like this. Another thing I like about this is it's a ghost story. And usually at the end of a ghost story, the good ghosts, they go up to heaven, they move on. The bad ghosts, they go down to hell, they're banished or exorcised or whatever. But in this one, at the end of the story, Madeline actually stays around. And she gets to stay on Earth and hangs out with Stacy. And I think it's cool because it seems very rare that a ghost story would end with the ghost staying on Earth. Oh, let's see what else I got here. The girl who plays Stacy, she looks exactly like JB Smoove. And yeah, I love the actress who played Madeline, the old lady. When she's talking about how nobody ever visits her and stuff. It's really heartbreaking, and I love the performance she gives when she yells at Stacy and is so mad at her for standing her up. It's very emotional. And overall, I'd say this is a perfect episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5. Really good episode. All right, on to episode 4. This is a Tucker story, and it's the tale of the phone police. And Tucker actually tells it over the phone on this weird cordless phone, which I'm not sure how they brought that out into the camp, out into the woods. I mean, maybe they have like a solar generator or something. And he says the phone is scary, and it made me think that it might have been kind of cool if they did like a When a Stranger Calls or a Dial M for Murder type episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? But this is nothing like that. This is about Jake and his buddy Chris. They like making prank phone calls. But after Jake's sister warns them about the phone police, these imaginary bureau of the government that comes and captures people for making prank phone calls, she tells them that this kid, Billy Baxter, got locked up by the phone police. And they look him up in the phone book. They actually find him, and they find his address. When they show up there, they find the phone police headquarters where they kidnap Jake and lock him up in a cell. And the cell actually has a toilet with no cover, like no seat cover, and no lid, which is pretty terrifying. But anyways, after that, he's locked in there. Chris has to figure out a way to help him escape, and that's about it. Another thing that happens in this episode is when Chris goes to Jake's sister. She doesn't know who he is, and like his room, all his stuff's gone, and it's like the phone police kind of have these mystical powers to just make people vanish somehow. But eventually, they escape and everything's fine. One thing I like about this is a unique story. It's like a really silly premise, the type of thing you would only see in Are You Afraid of the Dark, that I don't think a movie like this would ever get made. And another thing is it kind of touches into a fear lots of kids have had. I mean, we've all made prank phone calls, and we've all been afraid of getting busted. I really don't like that the phone police have mystical powers. It just seems kind of like an easy fix for them to, explain why, his parents don't go to court, or why his sister isn't looking for him, and things like that. But I don't know. They never really explained. It didn't really make sense. I don't see what it has to do with phones that allows the company who runs it to make people disappear. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. One thing that I do love is at one point the phone police are driving around looking for Jake, and they have like a cop car, but their siren, instead of a normal police siren sound, it's the sound of a phone off the hook. I thought that was a pretty cool little detail. And the sister, I thought she was actually pretty good in this episode. She wasn't given much to work with, but she did a good job. The two little kids, Jake and Chris, I didn't like them. They weren't so great. And the ending of this episode is really lame. They just Jake just shows up and helps Chris escape from the prison in the most simple, ridiculous way. Like, they run down a corner. Oh, it's locked. They kick down the door. Oh, there's nowhere to go. They go up through the sewer, and then they go back to the house. It's really lame. Like, there's no logic bombs or anything they had to drop to get out of it. They just sort of ran away. I don't know. I didn't like that so much. But since it's a unique premise, it was a memorable episode. I remember it from when I was a kid. I'm going to give it a 3. Okay. This will be the last one for this video. This is episode 5, Tale of the Doll Maker. It's a Betty Ann story. And she shows up with a doll. Tucker says, dolls aren't scary. And, of course, by the end, he's afraid of the doll. But I think dolls are creepy as shit. I think everyone thinks dolls are super creepy with their dead, glassy eyes and their white skin. So I don't know what he's talking about. But let me give you the plot of this one. Melissa's the main character. She spends summers with her aunt and uncle, and their neighbor's daughter, Susan, is one of her best friends. And so she shows up, but this summer Susan is missing. She's been missing for so long that her parents actually gave up looking for her and moved. But Melissa swears she sees Susan in the window of her old house, which happens to be the window into the attic. Her family warns her not to go looking for her in the abandoned house, but Melissa searches for Susan and discovers that she's been transformed into a doll and is stuck in this dollhouse in the attic, which it gets kind of confusing. But Melissa ends up inside the dollhouse and tries to save her, and she has to escape before they both turn into a doll and are stuck there forever. I really like this episode. I love the idea of having a friend who you only get to see every now and then, who lives really far away, but they're your best friend, and you look forward to seeing them, and when you see them, it's just like magical and great. I love that. For some reason, that just, I don't know, that I could really connect with that idea. And the actress who they cast to play Melissa, she seems so sweet and innocent and fragile, and her voice is so just cute and weak sounding that I can really understand why she was cast. But on the other hand, her acting wasn't so great in this episode, and I think that was the only thing that was really holding this episode back from being perfect. And to me, the thought of turning into a doll is terrifying. It's scary. Like, at one point, Susan, the girl who went missing, her hand comes off, and it's just like a piece of porcelain, and she can't, like, open doors or she can't do anything because her skin, her body's just made out of porcelain. It's not like the doll from the new Oz movie. It's like she can only move like a doll, and like she can't move her fingers and stuff. It's pretty creepy. I also love how there's no personified villain in this episode. There's no creepy, like, doll maker. It's called The Tale of the Doll Maker, but you never meet the doll maker. You just find Susan in this, and she never even says anything like, oh, the doll maker's coming to get us. And you never meet the doll maker, but you just have this sense that there's some kind of eerie presence keeping them there. And I really like that. I like that there's no personified villain. And, Yeah, at the end of this episode, the woman who played Melissa's aunt, I thought she did a great job acting in this. At the end, when Melissa comes back with Susan, who everyone thought was dead, and the aunt starts crying, I just thought her performance was really good, really believable. This is a great episode. I'm gonna give it a 4 just because I thought the main actress's performance wasn't great.